This build has no hit damage, but rather inflicts an agonizing pain to our enemies they cannot withstand. We use Lightning Blast as our main offensive skill, but it's only a means to an end to inflict the excruciating suffering our enemies must bear. But how can a hit-only spell like Lightning Blast inflict damage over time, and why don't we hit them several times to stack it? Well, you see, beneath the surface we inflict a damage over time debuff called Brand of Deception, which does lightning damage over time to our enemies whenever we hit them with a spell costing at least 15 mana. This ailment cannot stack, which makes it quite demanding to increase its damage to a respectable level, but once you do, the sky's the limit. The Brand of Deception is unlocked by investing 5 points in the Brand of Deception passive node. When you invest 5 points in the Orders in Position node as well, then the brand scales with general increase to shock damage. This is why increased shock chance on hit is extremely important to scale the damage of this build. It's important to note that this only applies to the general shock chance and not specific chances like chance to shock with lightning skills. For clearing zones, we also use several skills to boost the damage over time on the fly. The sequence orders of skills here is a bit different for clearing compared to bossing, but first let's look at clearing. First we use Glyph of Dominion. Now this gives us an 80% shock chance on hit when we stand in it, which subsequently boosts the Brand of Deception with 80% increased damage. However, that's not the skill's main purpose for clearing. You see, the Glyph also gives us haste for a long duration, which is important for clearing speed. After we have used the Glyph of Dominion, we then use Teleport before the haste expires, as Teleport will refresh the haste duration through the Comet Rush node. We also get the Elemental Affinity skill node for increased elemental damage for 4 seconds after using Teleport, which will boost the damage of the Brand of Deception as well. The last part is to then use Flame Ward, as this skill gives us 250% increased lightning damage from the Infusion node, since we have converted Flame Ward to lightning through the Lightning Ward node. For clearing, this can be used a bit sparingly, at least for when there are large groups of mobs or rare enemies, as the cooldown is a bit long for this skill. After this sequence of skills, we then hit the enemies with Lightning Blast to inflict the Brand of Deception. This lasts for 3 seconds, so if they are not dead by that time, we need to refresh the duration by inflicting yet another hit. It's important to use a Scepter, since wands decrease the mana spell cost so that Lightning Blast won't trigger Brand of Deception. When using a Scepter, the mana cost is 15, which is the minimum mana cost trigger for Brand of Deception. The only Scepter base you should aim for is the Argent Scepter, as this gives a high implicit increased damage over time stat. The low mana cost of Lightning Blast enables us to use all the other damage buff skills freely when clearing without having to worry about getting around 1k mana and a huge mana regen. As for bossing, the sequence is a bit different. First of all, we switch Lightning Blast with our other specialized skill, Static Orb. This is because we get a higher base damage with Static Orb, and since we only use the skill once every 3 seconds on one target, we won't run into very bad mana sustain issues for bosses. You see, Brand of Deception's damage is based on how great the base hit damage was, which is why Brand of Deception will do more damage with Static Orb. We start off by using Teleport. We then cast Flame Ward, then Glyph of Dominion, and then hit the boss when we stand on the Glyph. This will give us the 80% increased damage boost from the Glyph, since we get 80% chance to shock on hit. We rinse and repeat this entire process every 3 seconds for the duration of the Brand of Deception ailment, and whenever Flame Ward is on cooldown, we only use Teleport and Glyph of Dominion until it's available again. If you stumble upon mana sustain issues when doing this sequence on high corruption, then you can leave out the Glyph of Dominion entirely, or simply spec into more mana, which will also boost the damage of Static Orb through the Manacharged node. As you can see, defeating Herorot on 400 corruption is quite a breeze, which is by the way the most clunky boss fight in the entire game due to all the ice shards making you stuck and blocking you. This is even done by only having a tier 2 increased damage over time affix on my Scepter, and no damage affixes on the unique items for this build, so you can see that the damage potential here is great. As for attacking related stats, we want intelligence, increased elemental damage over time, increased damage over time, increased lightning damage, increased elemental damage, and chance to shock on hit, as this gives us the same amount of increased damage to Brand of Deception. To further increase the shock chance, we take the only offensive blessing for this build, which is the chance to apply shock on hit. I'm currently sitting at 440% shock chance, but it should be possible to min-max this even further if you want. For idols, we want many stout Legonian idols with the chance to shock on hit. This can be combined with flat health or increased lightning damage. If you lack elemental resistances, you could also get those as a suffix on these idols as well. If we don't have many of these idols, we can use the huge idols to get the shock chance from those. Also, idols with increased damage over time in combination with ward per second is king. As for attacking passives, we don't really take that many boosting our damage. Apart from the Brand of Deception related nodes, also giving us elemental penetration with damage over time and increased damage to branded enemies, we take the Rift Bolt node from the Sorcerer tree, giving us 15% lightning penetration. Now, if you enjoyed this video so far, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to support me making future videos like this. I would highly appreciate your support. Now for this build, the first defensive mechanism we need to mention is the movement speed. This is a critical factor to avoid enemy hits and make sure we can attack from a distance, even when facing fast melee enemies. Let's have a look at the sources of our high movement speed. Our boots have a tier 7 increased movement speed affix, with a base stat of increased effective haste. And since we gain haste from the grip of the minion and refresh it by using teleport before it expires, we are hasted more or less constantly. We also invest 6 points in the Essence of Celerity passive node to get a 10% increased movement speed whenever we have 2 stacks of arcane momentum, which is more or less also constant. We also get 5% increased movement speed from our belt and the final increase from the Rune of Dilation passive node, giving us 10% increased movement speed after using teleport. This amounts to a total of 110% movement speed, which we obtain most of the time. This gameplay was even recorded without the final 10% movement speed gained from the Rune of Dilation passive node, so this build is 10% faster than what you see the maximum speed is here. This is a hybrid health and ward build, so you can stack either of these hit points. We gain the majority of our ward pool by having the runic invocation skill on our skill bar to have 3 gun runes at any given time. These gun runes give us massive ward per second through the ward per second per gun rune affix. I have a tier 7 roll on my body armor and a tier 5 roll on my helmet, which provide a bunch of ward. The opulent focus offhand base is more or less mandatory for this build, since none of the other bases give us any good offensive implicit stats. The opulent focus base though gives us an insane boost to our ward pool with ward per second and ward retention. We have capped endurance of 60% with decent endurance threshold. This is a great defensive layer for us. An important contributing factor to this is the bonus from the 6 points invested in the Cerulean Runestones passive node, giving us 30% of our mana as endurance threshold. The endurance threshold can further be boosted by giving a better roll than I have of the Grand Vigor of Yorman blessing obtained from Herod. Our resistances are fairly decent, but obviously the poison resistance is just crazy on my setup at the moment, although it's arguably the less important resistance of the game. However, you should aim for having a higher tier affix of poison resistance on your gear if you can. Aim for having some critical strike avoidance on your gear in addition to the critical strike avoidance blessing from the Emperor of Corpses. There are 2 uniques that are borderline mandatory for this build, and that is the Atrophy Gloves and the Storm-Carved Testament Relic. The gloves have high penetration for all resistances for damage over time, which is a huge damage boost. These gloves can be obtained from defeating Riot. Further, the Relic also gives us lightning penetration in addition to 80% shock chance, which boosts the Brand of Deception damage greatly. This can be farmed by defeating Lagon. The Ossiarin Ring also boosts the shock chance and gives us 1% damage per shock stack on the enemy, but it's not mandatory to use. This ring is often hard to come by, as you cannot target specific bosses that drop it, but I have had it drop 2 times randomly during my playthrough. Finally, I used the Font of the Erased Ring, but this is only due to the insane tier 7, 6 and 5 affixes that I managed to add on top of it. This is not mandatory at all. You could go for the Strands of Souls belt to get more ward, but I got this really sweet belt that I'm very happy with, that also gives us a lot of health in addition to damage, so I kept this instead. Since the Brand of Deception is acquired quite late in the game, the leveling setup for this build is quite different from the endgame build. From the start of the game, specialize in Lightning Blast, but with a different setup of what we end up with. Max out the Arcing Power node first to get more AoE with chains, then aim for full points in the Overcharge node and Hypercharge node to get the chance for double and quadruple casts. You can also go for Chain Lightning to increase the maximum chains and see how much you can add while sustaining your mana. The Lightning Attunement and Front Loader nodes should be your next priority. During leveling, you should edit the loot filter to include items with increased spell damage to boost the hit damage of Lightning Blast, but make sure to collect the good items dropping for the final build setup, such as damage over time and shock chance. When you finally unlock Brand of Deception in the Runemaster passive tree, then you should respec Lightning Blast to the final build setup and switch to the damage over time gear that you have acquired through your progression. Now, if you enjoyed this build guide, please make sure to hit the subscribe button to support me making more videos like this. And you'll definitely like the playlist with all my last Epoch build guides showing on the screen right now, so go ahead and click on that.